that a lot of other people don't do.
Hi there. Oop.
Good morning. Today is February 19, 2026. It is approximately 9:30 a.m. This is the matter of several combined applications. It is an application Z0224-25 for a conditional use permit. Related several applications Z0225-25 floodplain development permit, Z0226-25 Habitat Conservation Area Development Permit, file Z0228-25 Willamette River Greenway permit, file Z0492-25 Steep Slow Review, and file Z0493-25 Water Quality Resource Area Development Permit. My name is Carl Cox. I'm a private attorney appointed by the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners as hearings officer with authority to conduct this hearing and make a determination in this matter. I'll state several important things before we begin. First, I've not received any ex parte contact in this matter, meaning no one contacted me outside of these proceedings to try to persuade me concerning a fact or issue present in any of these combined applications. Next, I've considered issues of bias and conflict of interest and have determined that I do not have any bias or conflict of interest in this matter. The county is making a record of this hearing. That record is available through the county. I'm going to make another statement. This is a quasi-judicial land use hearing, which means two important things for those participating in this hearing. First, all of the criteria that can be used in reaching a decision have been identified in the staff report. Testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the criteria identified in the staff report or other relevant criteria found in the comprehensive plan or other land use regulation that the person believes applies to the decision. Accordingly, please direct your testimony to a relevant approval criterion. Second, failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government or its designee to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. Once final, this decision may be appealed to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals. I'm also going to make a statement prior to ending or closing the record in this matter, but I'm going to wait and make that statement before we finish this hearing concerning any requests to keep the record open. At this time, I'm going to ask that the county provide an explanation concerning participation in this hearing via the Zoom platform. Please proceed.
Thank you. Today's hearing is being recorded as required by law. The county will make every effort to post the recording on the county website later today. Panelists for today's hearing, which include the hearings officer, county staff, and the applicant, have both audio and video capability. Audience members' cameras will not be turned on at any time. The audience members' microphones will be muted unless they wish to testify, in which case they will be called upon to do so by the county staff moderator. This is a designated time during the hearing when it will be open for testimony. The hearings officer will make it clear when this is. If you want to provide testimony, you will use the raise hand button. For people who have called in or joined by phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. Staff will call upon you when it is time for you to provide testimony. You will unmute your microphone and then provide your name and mailing address when you begin. Once you have provided your testimony, you can lower your hand and your microphone will be muted again. If the record is left open at the end of this hearing and you wish to submit additional written testimony, you can email written testimony to gmcallister@clackamas.us or mail it to Clackamas County Planning and Zoning at 150 Beaver Creek Road, Oregon City, Oregon 97045. My email address is also available on the webpage where you found the Zoom link for today's hearing. Testimony must be received by 4 p.m. on the day the record closes. People who testify and provide their mailing address will receive written notice of the hearings officer's decision and a link to access the full written decision. If you do not wish to testify but would like to receive the decision, you may provide your email or standard mailing address by emailing me at gmcallister@clackamas.us.
Thank you. The order of proceedings at these combined hearings today will be that I'm going to ask that the county begin the hearing by presenting evidence and testimony, and I believe that there is a staff report prepared in advance of this hearing, followed by the same opportunity for the applicant. Please proceed.
Thank you. Right. As we mentioned earlier, we have several cases before us today, part of one application. The subject property for the applications we are discussing today is shown on this slide, highlighted in white. It is south of the city of Milwaukee, within the urban growth boundary, adjacent to the Willamette River, taking access off of Laurie Ave, adjacent to railroad right-of-way. It's on tax lot 21E02 AC 01900. There is no address for the site. The site is zoned R10, which is a low-density urban residential zoning district, and the lot is about 0.87 acres. The current conditions of the site is largely natural area. At one time, there was a single-family home that was removed, which some of the improvements and some remnants of the development remaining on site, which include an access coming from Laurie Ave across the property to adjacent to the south of the subject tax lot. There's the gravel access, loops up onto railroad property and back onto the site. Willamette View's well system is also located on this subject property. Otherwise, it has been minimally disturbed. Today, we are looking at a proposal for a private park with river access and a private dock as a part of the conditional use application, which is 0224-25, and additional resource-related applications related to the project. The park includes a walking paths, viewing areas, a restroom, 2 picnic shelters, a boat storage building for kayaks and canoe type boats, other associated site improvements such as landscaping and parking. When you have multiple applications on the same property that are interconnected, the applicant can elect concurrent review, which is, we cited that code section on this slide today. So we are reviewing all of the applications concurrently due to their interrelated nature. One comment was received related to the conditional use application in support of the proposed park project, which is included as Exhibit 22. We also have Taylor Campy presenting with me today on the environmental related applications. And she did mention to me we failed to include a public comment as one of the exhibits, which we will add after the hearing. But Taylor, would you mind jumping in?
Yeah, thank you. Just one comment came in for the various environmental overlays that we reviewed. And that was a neighbor concerned with runoff. And so they did submit some photos and some written testimony. So that will be included in the record as well. Thanks.
Thanks, Taylor. Staff does recommend approval of all the applications before the hearings officer today with the conditions as listed in the staff report, which is included as Exhibit 1 of the materials. The application was deemed complete on December 5th, 2025. So we are on day 76 of the 120-day timeline, and a decision is due by April 4th of 2026.
And that deemed complete covers all of the applications on the same date?
Yes, that covers all of the applications. They were originally submitted, not everything was submitted at the same time, but a final, or on December 5th, the final applications Z0492-25 and Z0493-25 were submitted alongside the existing applications under the county's review.
So
Okay,
I
thank
think
you.
that technically, in case it matters for the record, since they're being reviewed concurrently, we have to go with the earlier of the deadlines. But I think it's the steep slopes and the WUCRA, the 49 Z0492 and Z0493-25. I think that those deemed complete dates are a little bit later, if I remember correctly. I can confirm that in a second.
I just wanted to make sure that I didn't have a timeline crunch with some of these applications actually deemed complete prior to that. The exhibit
No.
list that I received didn't have all of the deemed complete uh, forms in it for every
Okay.
application. So I'm asking, and now's the time.
Yep.
Yeah, no, none were deemed complete before December 5th.
Thank you for clarifying that.
On this side, you can see the site plans and the site plan and landscape plan for the proposed project. As I mentioned, they'll be taking access off Laurie Ave, existing easement on the adjacent tax lot to the south, which is currently gravelled and the applicant proposes to pave. There's a small 9-space parking area in the upper portion of the site that has walkways extending from it, connecting to the lower portion of the site, which includes the kayak boat storage building and a picnic shelter viewing areas for the users of the park. There's also a picnic shelter on the north side of the property, which is connected via the driveway access, which we'll discuss a little bit more later on in our discussion of the proposal. The site is a challenging site due to the steep slopes, the floodplain habitat conservation area. There's a lot to be considered when designing the park, and the applicant took special care to make sure that development is placed in such a way that the impact was minimal to all of the overlays on the site. The walkway system does become elevated through the steep sloped area to avoid additional impact. They've made efforts to preserve trees where possible to reduce their impact on the natural areas, while still having a nice flow that users of the park will be comfortable within and really blends into the natural area. The buildings, in a lot of ways, are accessory to the primary use, which is accessing the river, accessing the dock, and are just amenities that really support a nice park experience for the users. And it is a private park, so it has many features of a classic park you might see in a neighborhood, but it's for the Willamette View residents. Some other things to note is due to the fact it's private, about 20 feet back from the right-of-way, there is a locked gate that will prevent people other than members of Willamette View from entering the site, which will have a knockbox for fire, as well as another gate just north of the parking area along the drive to limit vehicle traffic on site and really make sure that it is pedestrian oriented and comfortable for users. So I mentioned before, there are a few buildings as a part of the application. We'll talk about the building design a little bit more later in the presentation. Generally, the buildings are small. I believe the bathroom is about 128 square feet. The kayak storage building is around 288 square feet, and the picnic shelter is 264 square feet, I believe. All have been designed to be compatible with the surrounding natural environment and not overstated features within the development. The approval criteria that's relevant to the development today is listed on this slide. The application is subject to Clackamas County Zoning and Development Ordinance sections 202, 315, 703, 705, 706, 709, the 1000 series, 1203, and 1307, which would be our definitions. The criteria for the underlying zoning district, environmental overlays, our design review, conditional use, and our procedures. For the R10 district, which we're looking at that criteria on this slide, recreational uses are a conditional use within the R10 zone. Parks are listed within those recreational uses in the use table in 313.03. The features included in the proposal in front of you are very common amenities within a riverfront park, including the shelters, restrooms, walkways, boat storage, and river access and dock. So the county is considering this to be a park for the purposes of this application. The applicant did apply for a conditional use permit, and staff has reviewed the proposal against that criteria and does believe that it meets the criteria for approval. One being that the characteristics of the subject property are suitable for the proposed use, considering the size, shape, location, topography, existence of improvements, and natural features. The park is designed to mitigate one of the ways that it is suitable, as I mentioned before, it's a challenging site, and the design of the park is absolutely focused on mitigating impact to the natural features on the site, avoiding steep slope areas, keeping significant and substantial development outside of the floodplain where possible, elevating walkways, reducing the ground disturbance, and trying to reduce impervious surfaces on the site. And in that way, they have made excellent use of a site that would be challenging to develop otherwise, making it quite suitable for the area. The fact that the park is private means that the use will be limited, doesn't require a large parking area, and will limit the number of improvements on the site. So again, it is suitable for this more natural area with a lot of environmental considerations that the impact can be minimal while still really getting the most out of the site. I think the applicant described it in the narrative as right-sized for their use in their community. With the existence of improvements there, the natural area has already been disturbed, and there are a fair number of invasive species. The part of the project will involve removal of invasive species and native plantings, which Taylor will get into a little bit more, but that will be help restore the function of the riparian area. The site entrance and access is already disturbed, existing gravel area. And so to access the site, they're not having to make significant changes and increase surface, impervious surface area or make more disturbances within the habitat conservation area. And the prior development did include river access. And so it's logical to have river access again within this location. And some of the challenges of the site, getting the kayaks to that lower area and not wanting to use vehicles, really making it a pedestrian-oriented site. The applicant has submitted a memo on how they're going to carry those kayaks. They'll be transporting them on the gangway and walkway by foot to that lower area. And so the design of the proposed use really does fit the needs of the proposed site. Another important criteria is that the character of the surrounding area is not substantial, or does not alter the character of the surrounding area substantially or preclude, impair the use of the primary uses in the zoning district, which is our residential uses. For the design of the site, the structures are set back from adjacent residential properties, which really is the property directly to the south is a single family home. To the north, it's undeveloped railroad right-of-way. The railroad is also to the west of the property. And so there's not a lot of residential directly adjacent to the tax lot, but is within the surrounding area. Mm-hmm. The applicant proposes screening on the south side of the property using native plants that will help limit the impact of the parking area and other structures from that adjacent residential property to the south. Plantings throughout the site will, over the years, really help screen the whole site from off-site view. And generally, the buildings are not something that will dominate the landscape of that riparian area. Parks in the surrounding area, parks in like residential areas are common features. And so it's not unexpected to have a park within an R10 zone. The properties to the south also have river access. And so additional river access should not preclude the use of those areas or the residential use. And traffic is expected to be minimal because it is a private park. People will travel by foot, and there also will be a shuttle to help reduce the amount of traffic in the area. As far as noise is considered, the screening of the plants will help mitigate noise. Additionally, Willamette View has community policies that prohibit loud music, disruptive behavior, and alcohol consumption on the site, which will help limit disturbances, allow people to peacefully enjoy their homes in the residential area. So in addition to the conditional use criteria, this property, as an institutional use, the park is subject to our 1,000 design review, development design review criteria. I've highlighted the relevant sections on this slide, and we've discussed those further in the staff report. We will briefly touch on the more kind of important pieces of it, or the pieces where there was more discussion, but any questions, of course, are welcome about these sections. So for our site design review, it's within the urban growth boundaries, so there are some requirements for clustering of buildings, locating buildings adjacent to the right-of-way as much as possible, having entrances that are well connected to the right-of-way. This is a non-traditional site in a lot of ways. The buildings are more support structures for the use of the park. There's not a traditional frontage like you might see in much of the urban growth boundary. And the sort of existing nature of the site and natural features does limit how the site is developed. So buildings are clustered to the extent possible on the site. Where you have the boat storage and picnic shelter adjacent, having the bathroom adjacent to the restroom area, or sorry, yeah, the restroom adjacent to the parking area. But clustering it all on one site is not, or in one area is not entirely feasible or makes the most sense for the use of the site. Without a traditional frontage, these buildings aren't really viewed or accessible from the public right of way. And so having them up at their setbacks towards the front of the property. This also does not necessarily make sense. They did provide a interconnected walkway system with one request for a design modification that we'll discuss further in this presentation. But generally, the site is oriented towards pedestrians and their use of the site, and the design has allowed for that. Regarding building design, the buildings are also not visible from public streets or private streets or really access ways. There's not traditional public entrances, as it is all a private area. And regardless of that, there is attention paid to the articulation of the buildings. They've been designed so that they fit well with the natural area, blend in using appropriate materials and colors. That will be long lasting, but also not dominate the view or, dominate the site when you're on the site, viewing the site from the river. They're really meant to blend in and not be prominent features of the site. For the roof design, they do have pitched roofs, and a 24-inch overhang would be typically required, but they have requested a design modification related to that. Section 1506 discusses design modifications, which may be approved if they will result in development that achieves the proposed purposes stated in subsection 1501 as well or better than the requirements listed, which the applicants did provide evidence of within their narrative. So one of the first design modifications was to the interconnected walkway system. Requirement within the UGB is that for the interconnected walkway system, where there is vehicle and pedestrian areas, or the walkway is adjacent to vehicle areas, there is physical separation between the walkway and where the vehicles would travel. You'll note on this site plan that the walkway extends to the east from the parking area and loops back towards the west, where it then connects to this paved driveway. There is not a direct connection from the walkway to the picnic shelter on the north side. And instead, the applicant is proposing to use this driveway for pedestrians to connect to that north picnic shelter, which is where the conflict between pedestrians and vehicles may exist. This is due to the fact that there are very steep slopes in between the parking area and the picnic shelter. And so to have a walkway there would result in additional disturbance. Additionally, there is the existing well, some utilities there that could be disturbed. To try and add the walkway to the east of where the driveway is would result in the need to remove additional trees from the site, which the applicant is doing their best to avoid removal of trees. So their proposal is to essentially have this shared pedestrian and vehicle path. There is a gate directly in front of where the walkway connects with the driveway to prevent and limit vehicle access. The applicant has certified that the only vehicles using this would be maintenance vehicles and would be for the continued access and maintenance to the existing well, which is how they have been using the site, and not as a part of this application. The other features they're using to help separate the vehicle access from pedestrians is they posted a sign stating, or they will post a sign stating service vehicles only, and stripe the path. So it's very clear that this is a predominantly pedestrian area to connect the parking area to this picnic shelter. And so they've provided evidence that they believe this is better, meets the design standards better, by efficiently using space, and not removing or impacting more natural areas than necessary for the site. The other request was to the 24-inch overhang. They proposed an 18-inch overhang, which is about 6 inches less than required. This is due to the scale of the buildings. Since they are smaller buildings, having a large overhang would not necessarily be proportional, or might maybe be over-dominate the look of them. And so they're requesting a reduction for that reason, and having them sort of blend more with the feeling of the area. And they provided evidence in their narrative. Regarding section 1007, which relates to our roads and traffic safety, traffic study was not required, as peak traffic is expected to be no more than 10 trips an hour, less than the 20 required. For the access, they are, as I mentioned, taking access via an existing easement across the tax lot to the south. They've proposed a 12-foot wide paved access, which the engineering development department does believe will function for the site. The fire district has reviewed it as well. Due to the railroad trestle, they actually won't be able to bring vehicles down to the site anyways, so they wouldn't be using that access. And they've certified that it is acceptable, and that's included as Exhibit 16. There is a condition of approval from development engineering included as 7B, that the applicant either work with engineering to get a design modification from their team for a reduced driveway width, or work with the property owner to the south to essentially expand the easement, whichever is the preferred path or best path for the applicant. For parking, as it is within the UGB, a parking lot's not required, but 9 vehicle spaces were provided. 5 bicycle parking spaces were provided, and parking is screened using vegetation from the tax lot to the south. And again, minimal vehicle traffic is expected from residents of Willamette View, and they'll be using shuttle systems and other methods to get some of their residents down there to reduce the use of the space. And I'm going to hand this on off to Taylor to talk about the environmental overlays.
Thank you, Georgia. I can go ahead and drive the PowerPoint if you want, if I can share. Let's see. There we go. Is that working for everyone?
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. My name's Taylor Campy. I'm a senior planner with the county, and I primarily focus on these environmental reviews. And so that's why I'm here today. Georgia and I worked together on reviewing the various layers of this proposal. The multiple environmental reviews are for the floodplain, the habitat conservation area, the Willamette River Greenway, the water quality resource area, and the steep slopes on the property. Those reviews comprise, I think it was like 55 pages of the report. So I'm going to do my best to summarize really just the important kind of takeaways. How did we conclude that they've met the criteria that apply to it? I'm not going to go into detail about why certain criteria don't apply, but of course you're welcome to ask questions and we can dig into those details if it is helpful or relevant. Ultimately, as you've heard or seen in the report, the findings do support that, with conditions of approval, that the applicants demonstrated that they can meet all of these criteria. And I will just say, I've seen a lot of these applications, and I want to congratulate the applicant team. They did a really good job, a good, thorough, complete job of submitting these applications. So that's always nice as a reviewer when your applicants put in the effort and thoughts. So thank you to them for that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so this first application or first file is number Z0225-25. This is the floodplain development application. The county was required to adopt these floodplain management regulations in order to be allowed to participate in the National Flood Insurance Program. And so what that means is that we adopted flood insurance rate maps, or FIRMs, and those maps were developed by FEMA in coordination with the county. And those show where the 100-year floodplain is, or that's the 1% annual chance flood. And they also show areas where those floodplain areas have a floodway. And so in this case, the property has both 100-year floodplain. You can see that in the stripes going across kind of maybe the majority of the property. And then the floodway is the, immediately adjacent to the river area. There we go. So in a nutshell, in the floodplain, which is also called the special flood hazard area, that area includes the floodway. The main kind of buckets of regulations that apply in those areas are you need to make sure that your development is anchored so that it's not going to, be swept away in times of flood. If you're developing structures, they have to conform to some specific engineering requirements, whether that is elevating the lowest habitable floor to a couple feet above the base flood elevation, or installing flood vents. I'll explain later why their proposed structures aren't required to comply with those specific requirements. Flood-resistant building materials are prescribed by FEMA in one of their technical bulletins. And then fill balancing. So if they were going to be placing any fill into the floodplain, they have to show how they're going to balance that fill. Floodway development. So as opposed to floodplain, the floodway is this kind of solid yellow beige area. Generally, new development in the floodway is prohibited, but Section 703 does allow for some exceptions. One of those exceptions is for water-dependent uses. And so what we're looking at here is we have a proposed dock. Obviously, that is a water-dependent use. It must be in or near the water to serve its purpose. And so that can be allowed if it's accompanied by what's called a no-rise certification. And this is an engineering study that essentially uses the same hydraulic and hydrologic modeling that FEMA used to develop the flood maps. And so they use the same modeling to demonstrate that their proposed development is not going to result in a rise in the base flood elevation. And so they did indeed provide that no rise analysis. And so essentially, if we're going to, to summarize the findings of this review, the dock and the gangway, these are the only parts of the proposed development that are actually within how should I describe this? I'll get into the detail on the next slide, but the area of the property that is below the base flood elevation. So these areas are where any development is going to be subject to those standards that I was referring to a couple slides ago. So the dock and the gangway will need to comply with, for example, the anchoring requirements. They've provided a geotechnical report that I'll talk about a little bit later related to the steep slopes, but that geotechnical report includes recommendations for foundations that are appropriate to the site that will ensure that those components of the development are appropriately anchored. They also will be using flood-resistant construction materials that comply with that FEMA technical bulletin. Obviously, what they're building is intended to be exposed to water regularly, so I'm not too concerned about that, but those will need to comply with the FEMA bulletin. And then they're not proposing any fill that would require balancing, so that's easy. What I was mentioning before, so there's a provision in 703 that allows the wording says that the planning director can consider credible evidence that shows that the site topography is actually a little different than what FEMA's mapping assumed it was. And so if we go back to FEMA's map, we see that kind of the majority of the property is within the floodplain. However, the applicant had the site surveyed and provided the topography here that actually shows that the contour of the base flood elevation is all the way up here, whereas the FEMA boundary is all the way over here. And so in that case, we don't have the authority to exempt them from getting the floodplain development permit for structures within that FEMA mapped boundary, but we can exempt the structures in this area from complying with the specific standards in 703.10 and 11. And so that's what I was referring to where, we have these buildings that are within FEMA's mapped boundary. And so normally they would be required to, be engineered either so that the floor is elevated to a certain height or so that they've got special flood vents and other standards. But in this case, their survey shows that all of that land is above the base flood elevation. And so they are exempted from adhering to those standards. So the review for the floodplain management district only really looked at the development that is within the area that's under the base flood elevation. So that includes the gangway and the dock. Okay, moving along to the Willamette River Greenway. This code section is ZDO 705. The entire property is within the Willamette River Greenway. And essentially, this section requires applicants to maximize the vegetated area within 150 feet of the mean low water line, and then preserve that vegetated buffer area. So we'll talk about how they're doing that. The only development that they're actually proposing within that area is the dock and the gangway for the dock. The dock is actually affixed to the shore farther from 150 feet from that area, and we'll look at that in a second. There is an exemption similarly in this code section that says if you want to develop within that 150-foot setback from the river, you need to qualify for one of these exemptions. One of those exemptions is water dependent uses. So similarly, obviously a dock is water dependent. We can permit that to encroach into not just into the setback, but into the river itself. So looking at that 150-foot vegetated buffer, this is probably small on your screen. I apologize, but they did submit this site plan showing how actually the distance between the mean low water line and the place where the gangway is affixed to the shore is 245 feet. So that's much larger than 150 feet that's required. And then all of the other development is even farther away from that. So we have no concerns about them encroaching into that 150-foot buffer. They're not proposing any disturbance within 150 feet of the mean low water line. And so that area will remain natural. Lastly, in the Willamette River Greenway, there are provisions that apply specifically to private non-commercial docks. So we do have here a proposed private dock, but the bigger question is it commercial or non-commercial? So for that, we looked to both the county's definition of commercial use, which is in ZDO 202, and I have that up here on the screen. We also can rely on or support that with the Department of State Lands definition of commercial use. I don't have that up on the screen, but it is in the report. They're very similar. And so in the county's code, commercial use is defined as the use of land and or structures for the conduct of retail, service, office, artisan, restaurant, lodging, childcare, adult daycare, entertainment, private, recreational, professional, and similar uses. This proposed use is a private recreational use. I'll just call out here, the Department of State Lands definition includes, makes a connection to like the like monetary exchange or something like that. And so one of the points that the applicant made was that Willamette View, yes, it is kind of it's a residential use in a sense, but it's not just residential. Their residents are paying for all sorts of other services that would be considered commercial services in addition to the residential service that they're paying for. So for those reasons, the dock is considered a private commercial dock, and so it's not subject to the dock standards in 705. Okay, moving on to 706. This is the habitat conservation area. On the screen, you'll see red representing the high HCA and orange representing the moderate HCA. This becomes important when the applicant needs to calculate how much mitigation is required based on how much of each type of HCA they are disturbing. Before we get into the rest of the criteria, I just wanted to call out that they are proposing some uses that are exempt from the HCA requirements. Those uses are removing invasive or noxious vegetation. They don't need an HCA permit to do that. They are paving an existing gravel access. And so in doing that, they are not expanding the footprint of that access. If they were, then the amount that they were expanding it by, that would count towards the disturbed area that they need to consider. But since they're just paving what's already there, that piece is exempt from the HCA review. They don't have to include that square footage in their mitigation calculations. And then lastly, they're proposing a stormwater facility within the HCA that will be a flow-through planter. That is also exempt from the HCA requirements. This section prohibits outdoor storage. And so in this case, we just wanted to call out, make sure that it's known that outdoor storage, including of kayaks or other recreational equipment, is not permitted in the HCA. So if you're going to be developing within any HCA, you either need to comply with subsection 70610A or 70610B. Pathway A imposes a maximum disturbance area. That's what MDA stands for. That MDA is calculated according to a rigid methodology that's laid out in 70610A in the tables based on the underlying zone and whether you're in or out of the UGB. They calculated what the MDA would be for the site, and the proposed development would just, what they want to do is going to disturb more area than the MDA would permit. And so for that reason, they're choosing to comply with pathway B because that allows flexibility. It allows you to disturb more area in exchange for providing an impacts and alternatives analysis, essentially requiring you to show that you are minimizing the amount of HCA that you're disturbing, and you're going to mitigate for the impacts of that disturbance. You're going to mitigate at least as well as you would if following pathway A, if not better. In this case, they have opted, I think I might have this on the next slide, they're opting to mitigate according to the prescribed methodology under pathway A. So that does make it a little easier for us to confirm that they will indeed be meeting that. Yeah, so proposed mitigation. So their submitted plans show that they are disturbing 9,764 square feet of HCA. That number gets plugged into the calculation under 70610A6 and spits out the result that they will need to plant 98 new trees and 488 new shrubs. Yeah, I've got the code reference down there in the corner. Those mitigation plantings have to comply with, do I have this up here? Have to comply with specific provisions related to the size of the plant when it goes into the ground, the spacing of plants, plant diversity, and then where the mitigation activities can or must happen. The plant spacing is is a concern, because if they don't show on a map that they can fit everything, then we're not sure that they'll be able to fit it, right? So they provided this map showing that they can indeed accommodate, the site can indeed accommodate all of these plants with the required spacing, and still meeting the mitigation location requirements. Their mitigation plan that they submitted includes details about the plant sizing and plant diversity that they're planning to install. All of that did indeed comply with just the standard pathway A criteria for HCA mitigation. Looking to the rest of the criteria under pathway B, as I mentioned, this pathway requires them to minimize HCA intrusion as much as they can. In order to do this, the code prompts you to demonstrate how you've essentially, in your alternatives analysis, you've tried all these various methods for accomplishing that. And so some of those methods that they'll be employing include minimizing their development footprint, maximizing native landscaping, minimal excavation foundations, which I'll talk about in a little bit, and then locating their stormwater facilities within the HCA. And so they are indeed doing that. And I mentioned how they're proposing a flow-through planter to be located within the HCA. That's on the north side of the site here. In their alternatives analysis, they looked at different locations for their parking, for the access, and for walkways. Some of the alternatives would have resulted in more pavement, more overall disturbance area. A major constraint, as Georgia mentioned, is that the site has a lot of steep slopes. And so one of the goals of one of the kind of priorities of the HCA provisions is to minimize the amount of grading or minimize the amount of disturbance of natural features. And so we're looking for example, ways to do that would be minimal excavation foundations. What they're proposing here is an elevated walkway. And you can see on this mitigation plan that underneath that elevated walkway, they're proposing to plant some of their mitigation plantings actually under that walkway. And so they've managed not only to minimize the amount of land disturbance by elevating that walkway, they'll just be putting, I think it'll be pin piles into the ground rather than, grading that whole area. And then on top of that, they'll be able to kind of double dip and use that space to maintain habitat connectivity. Another consideration in their major consideration alternatives analysis was they consulted with an arborist for figuring out how to preserve as many of the existing trees as possible. And so that did also result in some site plan adjustments in order to accommodate the critical root zones of those existing trees. The impact analysis looks at mainly connectivity, habitat connectivity, both to the water feature and also to other habitat areas. It looks at microclimate and shade, water storage capacity, bank stability, and sediment and pollution control, and then large wood and channel dynamics and organic material sources. And so the proposed alternative that they ended up with accomplishes these goals with they're minimizing the amount of grading that they'll have to do, both by avoiding steep slopes as much as possible and by using the what I'm calling a minimal foundation option for the elevated walkway. They're using the stormwater management strategies that are prescribed in Table 706-8. They're ensuring fish and wildlife passage with the dock construction. They're just putting pilings into the rivers. They won't be creating any particular barriers to fish passage. Wildlife passage is preserved or maximized on the site, especially with the use of the elevated boardwalk. All of the plantings will be native vegetation, and then they'll also be shielding the on-site lighting so that lighting is not shining either into the habitat areas or off-site. Okay, and that's it for 706. A very similar review with some overlap is section 709. This is the water quality resource area. There is a provision in both section 706 and 709. Since these sections have so much overlap, if you're developing in an area that's within both a water quality resource area and a habitat conservation area, you can choose to comply either with 706-10 or 709-10. In this case, most of the development is within both the habitat conservation area and water quality resource area, but there's a small portion that is outside of the HCA, but is inside of the WUCRA. And so that's the 120 square foot area in blue over here that we did need to do a WUCRA review for. So that's what we're looking at now. Also, I will note that the WUCRA review is kind of twofold. If you will be developing in or near a WUCRA, water quality resource area, you have to do what's called a WUCRA boundary verification. And so that is unlike the HCA where Metro has already mapped the boundaries of all the habitat conservation areas, the water quality resource areas are largely unmapped. And so in these cases, the burden is on the applicant to map the boundaries of that resource. And the methodology for doing that is prescribed in 709. So we've got both file number Z0494-25, which is the boundary verification, and then Z0493-25 is the actual review for, excuse me, permitting development to encroach within the WUCRA boundary. So let us look at, pardon me, I'm going to take a sip of water. So let's look at what this section asks us to look for. If you want to develop within the WUCRA, you need to show that there are not practical alternatives for avoiding WUCRA disturbance, similar to the HCA. Essentially, show us why you really can't reasonably locate your development elsewhere on the site. The analysis for this is very similar to, it's all part of the same analysis, to the reasons for why HCA disturbance was, is unavoidable, or how they've arranged things to avoid it as much as possible to minimize it, with steep slopes being a primary factor in that. The alternative that you're proposing you need to demonstrate how you're limiting the disturbance to just what is needed to accomplish the development. And then similarly, you have to propose a mitigation plan in order to restore the WUCRA with native vegetation. So that's all rolled into their HCA mitigation plan. And I guess that's it for WUCRA. Okay, so the last environmental overlay that we have is section 1002.01 hillsides. This is the steep slope review. Steep slopes are considered any slope that's over 20%. This property has both steep slopes over 20% and extra steep slopes that are over 35%. If you're developing on slopes that are over 35%, it bumps the review up to a type 2 review, whereas the 20 to 35% slopes is a type 1 review normally. And for slopes that are over 35%, there are some additional code criteria that apply to that review. So let's look at what all of the applicable criteria for this are. Grading and impervious surfaces on any slopes over 20% are limited to 30% of the total area of all of the steep slopes on the property. And indeed, they are not proposing to grade or disturb or create impervious surfaces on more than 30% of the steep slopes. I think it was more like 15% total. A geotechnical analysis needs to demonstrate that the site is stable for the proposed development, and we'll get into some detail on that in a moment. There needs to be a stormwater management plan, specifically looking at preventing erosion, sediment, and drainage flow. And so they did indeed submit a stormwater management plan addressing those concerns. In addition to that, some of those functions are also accomplished by the HCA and WUCRA mitigation plantings that will help with all three of those concerns. As with the other overlays, you're supposed to minimize grading. They've shown how their proposed alternative really minimizes the amount of grading that they will have to do on the site. This is accomplished both by the minimal excavation foundation for the boardwalk and also by where they're choosing to locate the parking lot, the walkway that's not elevated, and the structures. Those are all located in the flatter parts of the site so that they're not having to do any, pad grading or grading to deal with the steep slopes that there are. They will be revegetating the disturbed areas with the HCA and WUCRA mitigation and kind of overlapping with the grading concerns. They're siting the buildings in order to preserve those natural features. So as I said, just digging into some detail on the geotech analysis, which the code calls it the engineering geologic study. It needs to establish that the site is stable for the proposed development, and then any of the conditions or recommendations that the study provides need to be incorporated into the plans. Essentially, this is accomplished in the conditions of this land use approval. The applicant will need to follow the recommendations of the geotech analysis in designing in their designs for the site, and some specific focus is on the foundations for the structures, the gangway, the elevated boardwalk, and then the actual buildings themselves. One concern that I think we'll have some discussion about with the applicant, because they've done some more recent work on this, is that the submitted report identified that the site is unstable due to liquefiable soil It is a site class F, and that means, yeah, that's like the least seismically stable type of site. However, you are allowed to, there's an exception in the ASCE that allows you to treat the site as if it's a site class D if the fundamental period of your structures is 0.5 seconds or less. And don't feel bad if you don't know what that means.
I was going to ask.
Yeah, it relates to the building's resilience in case of like an earthquake in a seismic event. And so different types and sizes of structures will have different fundamental periods. That is all established by engineering standards that are either in the ASCE. I don't have access to that code, but we're recommending a condition of approval that essentially asks them to demonstrate, both document what the fundamental period is for each of the structures that's proposed on the site, and then also provide us with those code sections. The applicant did follow up with an email that I can include in the record a few days ago in response to this recommended condition of approval, providing that code reference and confirming that all of the buildings on the site do have a fundamental period of less than 0.5 seconds. I think also the elevated boardwalk, but they are waiting on confirmation from their engineer for the calculation for the fundamental period of the gangway. And so I think it might warrant some discussion with the applicant about what an updated condition of approval could look like. Currently, there's a proposed condition of approval saying that before we issue development permits, we need documentation that the fundamental period of each structure is 0.5 seconds or less. And I think the applicant's request might involve updating that to allow for the possibility that if it is not 0.5 seconds or less, that they would then proceed with the additional review that is required for site class F, so that they could still move forward with the development if they find that the fundamental period of the gangway is actually more than 0.5 seconds. They would be able to develop appropriately for that level of stability.
Let me interrupt right here. Is the applicant ready? Does the applicant want to discuss this proposed condition of approval? You're muted still, sir.
Yeah, thank you. I would ask John and Jenny, is that something that we're ready to talk about right now?
Yes, we can talk about it at any time, including right now. This is Jenny Bricker. I'm not David. I'm I'm the attorney.
Let's turn to it. Which condition of approval are we discussing?
It's on page 7. No, I'm sorry. It's on page 9. It's under application Z0492-2.
Okay.
5, steep slope. And it's condition number 1.
Condition number 1. All right.
Is that right?
Oh, yeah, sorry, you're right. Sorry.
That it's consistent with what I was looking for. What is it that the applicant is seeking to change here?
We would like to update the record, which sounds like Taylor has already done, by putting in the letter from the geotechnical firm NV5 that shows that all the structures on the site, with the exception of the dock gangway, do meet that limitation or fall below the limitation, the fundamental period of 0.5 seconds or less, which I have no idea what that means, but I'm just saying. Um, or very little idea, I guess I should say. And then in addition, as to so we have that documentation for everything but the dock gangway. And we'd like to expand that condition a little bit with respect to the gangway. The the engineer, there's a separate engineering firm who is designing the gangway. And they frustratingly told us that the fundamental period might be about 0.4 to 0.6. So we don't know for sure if it's if it's going to meet the requirement, but we do have the geotechnical engineer ready to do additional site-specific seismic hazard evaluations in accordance with the standards ASCE 7-16. And that would, if we don't meet the limitation, that would they would be able to make recommendations and establish that the site is stable for the proposed use and development, which is the language of the code. And so I would like to update that condition and also revise it to add the paragraph that I emailed earlier to Georgia and Taylor. And I can read that paragraph if you'd like. It's short.
Let's, is that in the record?
I don't know. I
This,
sent it last night.
yeah, we received it. I mean, yeah, I guess it was sent last night. We received it this morning. My recommendation was that the applicant presented as a part of their presentation and request that you
Okay.
change the condition of approval.
Let's get back to it then during the applicant's presentation. I haven't had a chance to see that email. I checked Excel last night and this morning and didn't find any updates. So I didn't have a chance to review it, but I'm happy to talk about it and we'll figure this out. And thank you, Ms. Campy, for pausing there for a moment. And I'd like to get back to your presentation.
Yeah, thank you. It actually was the last slide,
Okay.
so kind of good timing to stop. But yeah, so that was the last slide. And so I would have been asking for any questions anyway.
Perfect. Well, I did have that question, and I do have another one. Will your presentation be submitted as an exhibit to the record?
Yeah, it will.
Can we have that by 4 p.m. today?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. And any additional exhibits will also be included. Thank you. So the next order in the presentation of evidence will be an opportunity for the applicant to present information, evidence that the applicant wants me to consider in making a decision in this matter. Do we have any public participants at this hearing? None. I was going to say followed by an opportunity for public participants, but it doesn't appear that we have any. So at this time, I'm going to ask that the applicant present information that they want me to consider, and also that at some time during the applicant's presentation, we go back to our controversial condition of approval, proposed condition of approval. Thank you.
May I share my screen?
Yes, sir.
Carl, we do have 3 residents of Willamette View in our room here that do want to give public testimony.
Okay. I'm going to call on them during a public testimony portion after the applicant's presentation. Thank you for alerting me that there will be public participation. Typically, I see that through people coming into the county's website as public participants, but it doesn't make a difference to me.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, while David pulls that up, I will get started with comments that we have. So first of all, thank you very much to each and every one of you for being here. Taylor and Georgia, I'm inspired by the level of detail of your work and your presentation. very, very impressive. And Mr. Cox, thank you for holding this meeting for us today. My name is Craig Van Valkenburg. I'm the CEO of Willamette View, and I've been here 16 years now. And I want to share a little bit of context and story about the organization, why this is an important project for us to have in front of you as we discuss today. Willamette View, David, next slide. Willamette View is, we celebrated 70 years this last year. And so the doors opened up here in 1955. We are a nonprofit corporation. We're a continuing care retirement community, which means that we provide services for independent living residents, residents that need assisted living, memory care, home care services, and then a host of amenities and programs that actually support the organization. And uh, next slide, David, the mission and vision, please. The
Sorry.
organization was founded actually by the Methodist churches back in the mid 50s. They had a vision of creating a community living environment for individuals for aging in place and to create the kind of social environment that people would enjoy as they lived out kind of the rest of their life. To live here, you have to be 55 years or older. So we have at least 5 decades of residents that live here, some having been here at least 20 plus years now. So when the doors opened, is your slide deck able to change, David?
Yeah.
You're still on the first page.
Oh, not in our room. Shoot. I'm sorry, Craig.
Okay. What do you folks see, Mr.
I
Cox?
see the first page.
First page?
Really? Huh. I'm sorry about this. Why is that happening?
All right. Well, while you work on that, I'll keep sharing. So, in any nonprofit organization, you have a purpose as to why the organization was created and who it serves. And so we serve an elderly population or aging population that has chosen to live here after they've had a career in the field of their choice and raised kids and probably lived and traveled, you know, far and wide over the years. And then they find a community like Willamette View as the place that they choose to live for the balance of that time. So in that environment, there is also a mission to the organization, and each organization, obviously nonprofits, have a different view of why they exist. And for us, in our location and the population that we serve, in addition to our employees, is to inspire the art of living well, which I'll get into a little bit as we go here. We also have a strategic plan for the organization, so it speaks to what we have agreed or we'd like to see happen over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years with the campus. And having been in business now for 70 years, our campus has obviously transitioned quite a bit over that time period, and it has changed and it has grown. David, if you can go to the next slide, the overview. This is an aerial photo of our campus. The river property that we're speaking of is, if you look in the left-hand corner, there's a tall tree that is sticking up against the backdrop of the river. Essentially, the property is right there. It's right below that area of the railroad track. If you went back to 1955 and looked at the campus, what you'd see is that one tall building in the distance, that 8-story kind of 4-winged building. That was the original building of Willamette View. So the doors opened in January of 1955 and moved in 500 people. Today, 70 years later, we have 500 people on the campus. And you can see how it's expanded. And as you come south, the next building that you see right in the middle of the picture is independent living. Across the little driveway is independent living. Then the next step down is it's a mixed use buildings of independent living and assisted living. And then to the right at 3 o'clock on this screen is what we call our neighborhoods. And so we offer 45 rooms of assisted living, which is a higher level of care for us. And we also have a separately licensed memory care 15-room service. And then we have a 7-bed Medicare certified skilled nursing unit that is where somebody's out to the hospital, comes back, needs to rehab, and then get back into their home. We provide that service. And I do want to note that from a nonprofit perspective, that skilled nursing unit is open to the general public. We actually get quite a few admissions from Providence Milwaukee Hospital from people who live in the area that are looking for post-acute care rehab services. It's a fairly short length of stay, 11 to 12 days, fairly intense rehab services to get people up and get them back into their homes. The south part of the campus that you can see is a ring of cottages or duplexes. Those are all independent living. And down at about 4 o'clock, that is a very, very large garden that we have on the campus. And that is available to our residents to take up a site and pretty much garden as they desire. Our food and beverage program actually receives donations of produce and fruits from that garden that they put right back into the campus as part of our food and beverage program. So we have about 27 acres on this side of River Road. On the east side of River Road, we have a development that is independent living. We call them cottages. They're duplexes that we're building out because that particular type of living environment is very popular. People that are moving from a single family home still interested in that type of living environment. We've wanted to make those available to folks as they come here. So that when the doors opened in 1955, yeah, you can stay on this one. This actually shows you the same images that Georgia and Taylor have been showing in their PowerPoint. We put it in here to give you a perspective of the properties that we have and how it eventually kind of ties together with the river properties. So in the upper left-hand corner is the river property. Just below it at about 9 o'clock is a white box around 2 other properties that we own that are sharing a common property line with our main campus. So it's part of our overall master site planning work that we're doing is to transition different services, housing programs as we look to the future aging populations. And I'm sure everybody's aware that the baby boomers are retiring, and as that's happening, just like the generations before, people are looking for certain kinds of services, lifestyle, amenities, programs available to them that they either have enjoyed or they're very interested in experimenting with or experiencing as they age in place. The other feature of Willamette View that is unique, and I think it's really pertinent to understanding the organization's culture, is in 1955, 56, the residents that moved in here actually created a separate nonprofit corporation that's called the Willamette View Resident Association. It's a 501c4. It's a self-governed entity that for residents here, they have a voice in and determination in what happens here in the active daily living. So this is structure that, while not unique to the industry, is unique in terms of the time that this was established. So if you can imagine, I'll give you an analogy to it that's a little bit tongue in cheek. If you've taken a cruise and you've been on a cruise ship, there's a cruise director, and the cruise director, has responsibility for putting together all the different programs and services and amenities that you have access to as a cruising person. In our case, we do not have those people in our organization as employees. The resident association has developed themselves over the years to have a very solid governance structure, to have committees that are run by residents that oversee programs and services here on the campus. So in part, a development of this riverfront property for us ties into the resident programming of outdoor activities, of expanding life opportunities. We have residents that have a grounds and garden committee. So when I think that Taylor was talking about the vegetation that we've envisioned on this development ties into a lot of the work that happens on our main campus through resident engagement. We have three positions on our board of directors. So we have a volunteer board of 10 individuals, and three of those positions are ex officio for the leadership of the resident council. So the past chair, and vice chair of the council, not by the person, but by the position, are on our board of directors. Each one of them serves a 3-year term. So the strategy, the transitioning of the campus, the collective engagement is it's a shared activity, for lack of a better way to say it, that we work together to understand what people are looking for, to understand what the future options and opportunities are for us, and then the organization executes on those plans. We've had multiple uses of this river property that was mentioned earlier. When it was first acquired, it served a kind of a sewer purpose for the manor building that was abandoned and demoed when Oak Lodge Water District developed out their systems. There was a house on there that eventually burned down, so we did not replace that house. We actually had a dock on the river at one point that was swept up in a flood. We had water rights to pumping water out of the river for irrigation purposes. We traded that out for the permit to drill a well on the property. So that well actually provides water up to our main campus that we use for irrigation purposes across our entire campus. That was the last kind of transitional use of that river property. And we started envisioning what could be, which is what we're talking about today, about 16, 18 years ago. There was a vision for being able to develop out that river property for resident use. And David will go through the subsequent slides, but we envision it to be a multi-use site. People want to do bird watching. We have that. People do painting. We have that. In addition to just the park setting and the use of the dock. But it is an element of what we see as the future for the next years of our campus, of being able to provide access to the waterfront from our campus.
All right. So my name's David Constiam. I'm the Vice President of Community Services at Willamette View, and part of my duties is overseeing our wellness programs. And as Craig said, a culture of wellness is a pillar of Willamette View and has been for a long time. We recently did a questionnaire or a survey of our residents, and what was important to them in their wellness programming, and outdoor or nature-based activities was the second most desired element. We see the park as easy to get to, an easy and dignified access to the river. So even if you don't have the ability to walk down all the way down to the bottom of the dock, you can get to the park, and it's accessible. I just wanted to point out this painting by one of our current residents of a natural scene there. This is a current resident, John Cottrell. He's actually going to be giving public testimony today. But we have many residents who have kayaks now currently and are just biting at the bit to get down to the river in an easy way, easy access. So you'll notice here, this was taken like a couple days ago. We have a kayak storage area, and so plenty of residents who are excited now to use this. We also envision fishing, swimming, and simply just being down close to the water. Also, bird watching. We have a lot of birders here. This is a juvenile red-tailed hawk photo on our campus, taken by Patty Justice, who also will be giving testimony today. We're excited about the picnic area and having programs down there. This is another photo, or sorry, not a photo, but another piece of art by Jenny Seabrook, who's a current resident, inspired by nature and water and the Willamette River. And plein air painting. These are pieces by Bonnie Keller, which I just think are fabulous. So this matters. It matters to our residents. We're all aging. All of us on this call are aging, and we want this for ourselves. Outdoor recreation and just being outside is healthy. It being in natural light is healthy. Fresh air, being on the river. It's important that it doesn't end when you turn 65 or 75 or 85 or 95. It just it's universal, and our residents deserve that access. So we're excited about this. This fits into our mission, and I think that concludes my part of the presentation.
Thank you, sir. Does the applicant have other participants or want me to open this up for members of the general public, meaning your residents who are here?
Well, is it time to talk about that specific, should we discuss the specific?
We can do that, or I can hear from your residents.
I'm sure they'd like to participate, and then they could leave.
And then get back to me. That's what I thought.
Okay, so Patty, do you want to come sit here? I'm just going to have them sit in my seat and one by one. Oh, have you? Do you still? I stopped sharing. Can you see me now?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And please, I'm going to consider your input and testimony as a member of the general public. And I'm going to ask that you state your name for the record and your mailing address for the county so they can include you in this. All right.
Good morning. My name is Patricia Justice. I live at 1532 Southeast River Ridge Drive in Oak Grove, 97222. I've been a resident at Willamette View for almost 5 years. I learned about the possibility of a dock when I first moved in and have been eagerly awaiting it. So I offer this testimony in favor of the proposed dock. First, a dock with on-site storage makes kayaking and other paddle sports more accessible to residents and eliminates the logistics of transporting a kayak to a distant lake or river. This is ideal for seniors like me who don't want to or no longer can load a kayak to a roof rack carrier on their car, unload it at their destination, and then do it all over again in reverse at the end of a day of paddling. It's too much. Having a dock with storage will allow many of us to continue water-related activities that otherwise we may have had to give up. Concerning the increased dock size, the proposed dock is a floating dock, not a stationary one, and is subject to rocking with wave action due to wind or boat wakes. A wider dock will add more stability, making it less likely to rock in the waves. Some of us, including me, are not as steady on our feet as we once were and may avoid walking on an unstable dock. Increased stability will open the dock for use by a larger number of residents. In addition, a small dock that's supported, for example, only a kayak launch would exclude residents interested in other water activities. Besides kayaking, I like to fish and swim or just sit on a dock watching the wildlife and river activities. The increased length and width of the proposed dock will allow for multiple uses by many people. And last, concerning habitat restoration, an added benefit to building a dock is the opportunity to improve habitat by restoring the adjacent land to native plants, trees, and shrubs. Insects, especially flying insects, are declining worldwide. Growing up in the 1950s and 60s, I can attest to that. Never have I seen so few insects, especially butterflies, compared to when I was younger. And loss of habitat is a contributing factor. Ridding the land of nuisance trees and plants and restoring it with native plants and trees will create a healthy habitat that will support and increase our populations of native insects, birds, and animals. Many of us here at Willamette View, including me, like to garden and to help maintain our beautiful campus. We will welcome this addition and will be good stewards of the land. And this concludes my testimony.
Thank you. I appreciate your time and your citizenship in participating in this hearing. I'll consider your statements.
Trying to get over all the cords and things that we have. Hopefully you can see me and hear me. I'm John Cottrell. I live at 12705 Southeast River Road, 404E. I did submit a letter, I think that you have, but I certainly, how do I put it? I'm excited about the concept of having this. In my letter, I mentioned the fact that kayaking, even from high school, I built one then, I built another one before I moved in here, and being able to get it on the river. I do have a car, but at the same time, Patty mentioned how difficult it is to actually, well, number one, I don't like the rack on all year, so I have to get the rack back on and then get it on and off. It takes, a friend of mine and I actually spent more time loading and unloading the other day, and we never actually got on the river because of the traffic in the different places to be able to put on, and we really kind of were upset on that. It's already been mentioned, we do already have kayaks and canoes at the location here. And a lot of people have they sold them maybe when they're living in Philadelphia and they move here, but at the same time, it's something they have had in the past. And I have actually an extra kayak of somebody that passed away that they can actually use it too. So it's the fact that if we had something like that, people that have done canoeing and kayaking in the past would be able to join in again on those passions. The Willamette River certainly has a interest to me. I've been, I mentioned in high school, I went 165 miles on the Willamette, and I've done most of the Willamette in between. I would have liked to have gone over the falls when it was flooding, so I could not have to worry about the falls, but I missed that opportunity. The other item that I think is very important is when you think of a retirement community, sometimes you forget how active people are, but we have an active group that does snowshoeing. We have an active group that does cycling. We have a lot of people that do a lot of walking, and we do have the residents that do have canoes and kayaks that do get out, as you can see from some of the pictures. And not everybody drives, and that's another item that I think that's kind of nice for this area. It's close enough that people can actually walk, or even if they don't walk, it's close enough that somebody can provide a shuttle down there, and we also have a shuttle on campus that we could also use. Another item on the size of the dock, one of the pictures I had on the left showed a group of high school students that I used to take each year down between Corvallis and Independence. And if you have, a lot of times in kayaking, you don't like to go by yourself. So having a dock large enough that you can actually get a couple items, to get ready to go at the same time is nice to have some space on the dock to be able to do that also. And if you have very many, you don't have that capability. And from definitely the pictures, birding, watching the birds, and just being out in nature for me is probably the most exciting thing, and the quietness usually that you can get along in kayak and the self-propelled boats. And do you have any questions that you have for me?
No, sir. I did read your letter and your support of this series of related proposals. Thank you for your citizenship. I will consider your letter and your comments in your testimony today.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good morning. First off, thank you to everyone on the call for all of the very evident hard work that has gone into this and led to a careful and thoughtful review. My name is Preston Church. I reside at 13169 Southeast River Road. And I'm going to read pardon me?
And you're a resident of Willamette View.
And yes, my wife and I are residents of Willamette View. We've been here now about 6 or 7 months. And when this project came to my attention, I was very enthusiastic. My wife and I are recreational kayakers. I think we got our permits for our kayaks our second day in Oregon, and have been out exploring as much as we can ever since. Whenever I get my wife on the water, she tells me it's her happy place. Certainly we may call it day kayaking, and that's because it really does involve a day and planning. The time it takes to load gear, safely load kayaks, get to a kayaking site, get your 2 hours in on the water, and then put the whole process in reverse. It really does take the better part of a day. And that's assuming that conditions are actually still suitable once we get to the kayaking site. And we all know that particularly with our microclimates and our somewhat unpredictable winds, things change in a hurry. And I end up scrubbing about a third of the trips we set out on because of that. So what an opportunity this is to be spontaneous,
to wake up to a beautiful Oregon day and say, let's go out on the water, and I have everything right there. This opportunity would certainly increase my time on the water. It would double it. And that means it doubles my enjoyment. It means it doubles the time I can get others out on the water with me, because now I have this opportunity to do things more spontaneously. Being on the water makes me a better kayaker. It also allows me to appreciate the area more and be a better steward and advocate of our Oregon waterways, which I believe are an important treasure and very much want, need, and desire our support. So I think this is a marvelous opportunity. It's not just for me, it is for an entire community that can benefit this from in a number of ways, as you have heard. And I think it's, again, I think it's just a fantastic opportunity that we have to capitalize on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your participation this morning in this hearing and your citizenship and providing your input into these proposals. And I will consider your letter, not your letter, your testimony and input this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
That concludes everybody we had.
Thank you. Let's get back to the business of conditions of approval. I'm still looking at that condition. It is frustrating that your contractor is saying between 0.4 and 0.6. That's well, it could be yes and it could be no. That's as good an answer as that is. How if your gangway will not meet the standard, what's our alternative here?
Well, the 0.5 second limitation is not in the code. The code is broader as I read it, and that is why I'm proposing just adding a paragraph to that existing condition that says if there is a structure, and by that I mean the only one left, the dock gangway, whose fundamental period exceeds 0.5 seconds, then the applicant, we'll have the opportunity to go back to our geotechnical engineering firm and conduct additional analysis specific to the site, a seismic hazard evaluation, in accordance with engineering standards, and be able to meet the code requirement, which is to establish that the site is stable for the proposed use and development.
So
and
you're
that's
talking
all.
about a license like a PE certifying
sure.
that it meets the actual standards.
Yeah, it would be a geotechnical engineer.
Geotechnical, okay.
And the other consultants, the ones with actual science backgrounds, please correct any misstatements I may make as I go.
Or my misunderstanding. It's how I understand it is that your proposal is that if it does not end up meeting the 0.5 seconds or less standard, that a geotechnical engineer review the standards and certify that the proposal will meet the underlying requirement.
That's a fair way to summarize it.
Without
I think
actually reading your statement.
They will have to,
Yes.
yeah. They will have to do more analysis. They'll have to come back out to the site and do some additional seismic analysis.
Okay, I'm going to ask the county staff, do you have any comments about this addenda to the proposed condition? Or I don't mean to just put you on the spot.
Oh,
That's
it's okay.
not very fair.
No, it's okay. My and Georgia and Lindsay chime in feel free to chime in. I think it's a good solution, and my just thinking about for our side of things as we're going through the actual development permitting and the documentation that we need in order to make sure that the various approval criteria are met. So I would want that condition to just be clear that we need documentation of that determination. We need the official, stamped documentation from the engineer confirming that determination.
Stamped, right. That's stamped by a PE.
Yep.
Right, stamped PE. Okay. I think.
And I guess also while we're on the same condition, and here again, we're talking about the one on page 9.
Yep, page 9, proposed condition number 1.
That's correct. If there's a way to update that as well, we do have the documentation submitted for every structure but the dock gangway.
Okay.
I mean, it's not absolutely necessary since we have to come back to it anyway.
Yeah, and I'm not the one that looks to see that you did that. I'm just the one that is looking to see that the conditions of approval that are here are related to the requirements that you're going to have to meet that haven't been met at the time this staff decision was or staff report was written. So
and there's
if you're saying you've met it, it's still going to need to go through the staff to make those, check those boxes.
Okay, and that's understood. And that's, I think this is the only condition that we'd like you to consider an amendment to the actual condition. The other one is just another update, and that's the one. And I gave the staff a copy of our authorization from the United States Army Corps of Engineers. We have a letter of permission authorizing the dock, but we also need one from the states. So I think it's sort of the same deal. We partially met the condition, but probably does not need to be reworded.
No, the staff can receive those documents at the same time, and then that condition can be met. I read the proposed there. So you did beat me to my next question. I think that there were no other conditions of approval that this applicant disagrees with. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, perfect. All right. So I will receive your written alternative proposal or addenda to that condition 1 to Z0492-25 by 4 p.m. today. I think it's already going to be at the county's offices, and the county can get that in the record by 4 p.m. Let me talk about the timeline for closing the record here then. I have a statement to read. Okay. Does any party or member of the audience want an opportunity to provide additional evidence, arguments, or testimony? Does the applicant wish to waive the period for final written argument? So there are no other public participants other than the residents of Willamette View that are all in support of this application, as I understand it. Is that true,
Yes.
Ms. Reinhardt? No one else came in? Okay.
Right.
And I don't know if there were any other submissions to the record. The record in any matter will be open till 4 p.m. today. So is there a request first to keep the record open past 4 p.m. today?
Not from the applicant, Your Honor.
The county? No?
No.
All right. And now let's talk about this second half of this. Does the applicant wish to waive the period for final written argument? Now, the snag I see here is that you don't know if there's another submission to the record before 4 p.m. other than the ones we've discussed. And the record will stay open till 4 p.m. So what I'm going to ask is that you verify that the materials that you submitted to the record are there by 4 p.m. so that I have a chance to review them. And if you see that after 4 p.m. today, there's no other materials that you object to or want to respond to, that you submit an email to the county asking to waive your period for final written argument, and unless you want to keep it open. I mean, I'm not telling you one way or another. I'm not telling you to do this. I'm suggesting that if you really don't want a final written argument because there's nothing to respond to, that you can just ask at that time to waive the period for final written argument. Any question about that?
No, I think what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, is that we don't need to waive our final written argument now. We can do it at 4:05 with an email to staff.
Yep. I just think it's a little bit difficult to waive your period for final written argument, not knowing what else is coming to the record. And yes, I've received materials between here and then had to reopen a record. So let's just avoid that.
Good,
That sounds
thank you.
perfect to me. Thank you.
Yes. All right. With that, I'm going to close this hearing, keeping the record open till 4 p.m. today at a minimum, and I'll look to determine whether the applicant wishes to waive the period for final written argument before I close the record. Okay?
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet everyone, and
Thank you.
Thanks for all your
I'll
hard
look
work.
to receive the materials that we discussed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.